You hear me okay? No.
You can. Now you
Oh,
can.
there you go. Okay, we'll just hold on a minute because we have, oh, now I can't see you, Leslie. There you go. We'll just give it a few minutes until everybody,
So how many,
hold on one sec. Just
is
trying to,
anybody else there now? Do you, I
yeah,
don't have any.
we have at least one person here now. I don't know how to stop it until we're ready, so.
Um, I don't have that view.
You don't.
I'm gonna see if I, no. Oh, I see there are three.
And a cat.
Frank has joined us. That's lovely.
Yeah. Well, we'll just hang tight until.
Can Frank hear our exciting conversation right now?
Don't know. Clearly not experts at this, are we?
Anyway, I think I've aged 20 years in the last 2 days.
Yeah, excuse us, anyone who's on this. We're just going to be like not talking real estate until 7 o'clock. So I
We've
don't
got
know.
4 minutes. So yeah, I see some participants there. That's great.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we'll just wait till 7. Do if I could like shut this down for a minute and so we could not make people sit here listening just babble on, that would be good.
I'm happy to do whatever you want. You want me to leave?
No, I mean, people are probably used to us babbling on, aren't they? That's kind of what we do.
Uh,
Okay.
I've blurred my background, but it looks the same unblurred as
Yeah,
it does blurred.
I guess if you're on a against a white wall.
I gotta get me some art.
Yeah. Yeah, I blurred mine too. Obviously, it's not the best scene here otherwise. Yeah, you got rid of the dog. I should have got rid of the cats.
Oh, I think the cats make it.
We'll see how many interruptions we get. All right. Well, I got about 3 minutes, so we'll just hang tight. I'll just mute myself for 1 sec because I just gotta do something quick. How did your last couple of showings go, Leslie, on your wonderful?
I have a listing now, if anybody out there is hearing this, that is fabulous, and everybody loves the house. Everybody loves it. Haven't heard a negative.
Stunner. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. Great to
Yeah.
get good feedback.
Yeah, and people who have been through, the agents keep calling.
Yeah.
So like, stop calling, just do something.
Yeah. You know, high-end listings, as we know, takes a while. So
No, and I think that the action or the activity, the interest is greater than I led her to believe it would be. And the follow-up questions are like almost every day from a few people.
excellent.
So yeah, so I'm going back there again tomorrow for 2 more.
Good for you.
Have we
Just a
both
matter of
frozen?
time.
I've frozen. What does that mean?
Yeah, you're frozen.
Oh, no, I'm not.
I am going to now share my screen and I guess we can get started because it's 7.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hopefully everyone can hear us okay. If you can't, just put something in the chat. For those of you that don't know us, I'm Janelle and I'm here with Leslie, and we work together as part of Remax Hallmark. We are we've known each other for pretty much 100 years actually, and work together. Well, it's kind of feels like 100 years back in the old days before real estate. So you know, we do have a podcast, which I think most of the people on this webinar today will have come from our podcast. I think people who listen, in case you don't, it's called the Toronto Real Estate Show with Janelle and Leslie. And we talk about a lot of different things on that podcast. And one of the things we talk a lot about is investment properties. And because of that, we get a lot of questions and thought it would be helpful to do our first webinar. So this is the first one we've done. So you know, bear with us if we're not answering all your questions. We're going to try to, you know, approach things systematically, and I'll go over a little bit of an agenda here. Except that I can't change screen. See, we're already having a glitch. So hold on a second here. Let me just figure this out. For some reason, I'm having difficulty. Bear with me. Okay.
So in the meantime, I'll monitor the chat a little bit. Would you prefer to have questions throughout the presentation? Or,
I think so. I mean, what I'll try to do is go through relatively quickly. We will, you know, not take too long to go through these slides that we've put together and just sort of give you a rough estimate of the things that we're going to talk about. And I'll give you, like I said, a bit of an agenda. So if there's something that it makes sense to jump in and ask a question, please feel free to go ahead. So, you know, obviously we are talking about the first time investor in particular. And there's a lot of people who, I think we even have some people on today that have already invested before, but this is really going to be geared toward people who are investing for the first time and want to know what they should be looking for. And as I mentioned, you know, this is our podcast. This is what it looks like. So if you're looking for us somewhere, you can find us on Apple or Spotify. And that's what our little logo looks like. And just a little bit about us, because I think it's important. As I mentioned, we've worked together for a long time, but we have about 20 years of experience working all over the GTA. We do condos, we do homes, we do commercial space, we do a little bit of everything. And I would say we are generalists. And so we have a really broad, extensive knowledge of the entire real estate market after all of these years. And so, you know, what we're going to give to you today, I think, is information that hopefully you will find helpful and coming from people who are living and breathing it every day.
Right. So you can see by those blue markers, yeah, we have lots of experience in lots of different types of housing everywhere in the GTA and beyond.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
It is. It is. I mean, I think we both prefer it that way because that allows us to kind of branch out and do different things. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with the real estate market now, because I think that's important in giving a bit of a reference. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of buying an investment property, what you should buy, where you should buy, how much you should spend, a little bit about what you are required to have in terms of an investor yourself if you want to purchase an investment property. What your role is as an investor, the returns that you should expect, and then we'll do a fair bit of Q&A. I think I suspect people will have questions, so we'll leave it open for questions at the end.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, but as Leslie said, if you've got something that makes sense to ask now, just throw it in the chat and we will make sure that we are addressing it for sure. Okay, so what's going on with the real estate market? I think this is one of our big topics of conversation on our podcast, but it's a lot of misconception about the real estate market as a whole. So we all know that prices were crazy, crazy high in the beginning of 2022. We went down a little bit starting really in March. It was a very sharp, dramatic March break happened. Prices started to fall. Inventory also fell. And we had a very slow remainder of 2022. We started to really feel it pick up, I'd say around November, December. I could feel sort of a bit of momentum happening. Definitely over the last couple of months, we've seen a trend. So we've had a 4-month trend of prices going up after they fell from last year. So I think that's important for everybody to know, because the headlines you read are very inflated. Obviously, headlines are meant to sell. And so they don't necessarily give you the full picture. So we're seeing that, yes, prices fell in many areas, some particularly more than others. And year over year, we're still down right now, but month over month, we're gaining traction in terms of price and sales volume. So that's important for all of you to know from a real estate investment standpoint, because the time for getting a deal may have passed, and I think that's probably true. However, we are still on the upswing, and I think it's going to continue to rise over the next few months. And certainly, we will end up, I think, in 2023 with gains over 2022, but probably not a lot. And who knows what will happen after that. So what we're seeing is definitely the East seems to be stronger than the West, and Durham region, Scarborough seem to be the hottest areas in town right now. The West End, definitely a little bit slower, particularly Mississauga, Brampton. So they're taking a little while to get heated back up. And as I mentioned, month over month gains, and we do anticipate having a pretty good fall. And we're definitely seeing a lot of forecasting come out from real estate brokerages and such, talking about how strong they think the fall is going to be. So that's kind of what we're expecting.
Yeah, there've really been some revisions lately in the previous estimates. And I think the recovery has been sooner and faster than many expected. And, the media, just as you say, it's kind of inflammatory. Good news and slow news doesn't sell. And, often there isn't depth to much of their research and interpretation of what's going on. And certainly the absence of local news is a problem, because they just kind of skew everything together. So you really have to read what you read about the real estate market with a grain of salt, and dig a little bit deeper into what's really going on. And yeah, we start to see, I think, feel anecdotally, shifts in the market a little bit before they're reported on. So we've been feeling, quite optimistic for quite a few months now. Yeah. And now it's being reported.
Yeah. And now it's being reported. Exactly. Yeah. So just a word of caution, obviously, just put it all in consideration when you're reading all of that stuff out there. Okay, so there's lots of pros and cons about being investor. So I really want to just spend a little bit of time talking about this. So I think, first of all, I should say I am an investor myself. I own 4 investment properties as well as the home that I live in. And it has been, and I'll show you at the end how successful that's been for me. as someone who, you know, was doing kind of one-offs one at a time and looking for good deals, and sort of how, you know, that's transitioned for me over the last 10 years or so. You know, it's my belief that regardless of what's going on in the real estate market, you cannot buy or get a better investment in any area other than real estate, because we have consistently made better returns in the GTA than any other type of investment out there year over year, you know,
Yeah.
and really you can't beat it.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're in the industry, so people often say, well, yeah, you're biased. But, you know, we're in the industry and we're biased by facts, by reality. You know, nowhere else will you make the return you will make in real estate. And there are going to be fluctuations, and you're going to have to weather a few storms, like maybe, you know, parts of 2022. But that's true of every investment. And the recovery in real estate has always been much stronger and faster than any other investment. So yeah, we're biased because we're in it, but we're in it because the evidence suggests it's smart to be in it. And
Yeah,
kudos to you
exactly.
for owning so many investment properties and realizing this a lot earlier than I did.
Yeah, well, it's been good to me for sure. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about this as we go along, but having something for a long term is best. So I think if you're thinking about buying an investment property that you want to flip, or that you're only going to keep for a couple of years, I don't think that's where the benefit is. I think where you succeed in doing this as an investment strategy is buying something that you're going to keep long term. And we'll go over why that is in a minute. You know, you're able to build a portfolio of, I'm sure, you know, most of us have other investments as well, but I think the bulk of your investment should come from real estate. That's just my own personal opinion. But being able to buy, you know, different places in different markets, different things like that, as you successfully kind of transition through this, maybe it's one now, maybe it's three, and, you know, in another 10 or 15 years. It allows you to really, you know, expand what you have.
Now,
Cons,
Janelle,
though, you know,
sorry for interrupting, but related to this topic, somebody attending has asked this question. For investment purposes, are you excited or are you slightly disappointed with the market settling and recovering?
I, first of all, don't look at it in terms of micro increments. It's irrelevant to me what the market is doing, because I buy something that I intend to keep for a very long time. So if it's going up, if it's going down, if it's going level, I could care less. It doesn't mean anything, because I know over the time, and again, I'm going to get to a slide that kind of shows you what the growth of mine have been. If I'm losing or gaining $20,000, $30,000 or 50,000 here or there, it doesn't mean anything, because again, it's a long-term strategy. Yeah. So cons, obviously, there are expected costs that can come with any home ownership at all. That's always something that I think an investor has to be aware of. If you're buying a property, you have to know there's going to be costs associated. You will need a new roof at some point. You will need a furnace. You will need to do renovations, and tenants can cause problems. And that's just how it goes. And as with any investment, as things go up and down, you have to really make sure that that makes sense to you as you're looking at what you've bought in the area and the type of tenants that you're putting in there. The biggest, I think, issue with having a investment property from people I talk to is our tenant issues, right? Toilets and tenants. People don't want to deal with these things. They don't want to, you know, deal with tenants. They don't want to have the problems associated with tenants. And who does? And again, that's something we'll talk a little bit about. And the other con of investing, I think, for a lot of people are the upfront costs, because it's not like just, you know, purchasing other different things. There are requirements. You need to be able to qualify from a mortgage standpoint. You need to make sure you have enough of a down payment. And we will get into that a little bit as well. Okay. So this is one that I feel really passionate about, and I'm going to talk about what you should buy. So again, we're talking about probably here the first time investor. So someone like me who doesn't have a lot of money, I'm not going out and buying an apartment building, I'm doing it on my own. What do I buy with the money that I have? So you've got options, obviously a condo versus a house. A lot of people, I would say the majority of people I talk to on a regular basis think they want to buy a condo. And
Right.
I will always say here and forever, that is not the best investment for you to buy. You should, if you can, buy a house over a condo.
You can
And
see why people would say that though.
absolutely, because it's low maintenance and they think it's cheaper.
Easier,
It's
cheaper, yeah.
easier. But you should, if you're thinking about buying an investment property, be looking at something where you are going to have a positive cash flow at the end of every month, or at least break even. And it's impossible to do with a 20 or 25% down payment on any condo because of maintenance fees. And I'm all about condo living, don't get me wrong, but from an investment standpoint, I don't think it's your best bet. What you should be buying, if I had my way to tell you, would be some sort of a duplex or a triplex. So when we call that, you know, whether or not you want a single resident or you want multi-family or multi-purpose, sorry, cat problems, then you should be looking at, you know, something like a duplex or a triplex. And again, I'm talking about a first-time investor. So these are people that don't have a whack of money. This is, you know, somebody who's got something that they just want to get started on. And there's lots of them out there. You can buy in the city or any city that you want. We'll talk about that in a minute too. The next step up would be something with 4 or more units. So the way properties are grouped here are, you know, we have anything from 4 to 6, from 6 to 10, from 10 to 20. Those are often commercial properties as well. Like they're not just residential, but they're zoned commercial. So there would be perhaps like a lot more, you know, units, a very different type of investment structure that would go into maybe something like that. For most of us buying our first investment property, that might not be, you know, the solution that we are thinking about just because it's pretty expensive. And then the other type would be a commercial space that has a residential as well. So, you know, maybe it's a store that has an apartment upstairs. So that's something that you might want to consider as well, because sometimes we can find, you know, units out there that are pretty reasonable that you can rent, you know, the basement to a hair salon, and upstairs there are, you know, 2 different apartments or something like that.
Now, someone is wondering what your view is on buying pre-construction condo.
I'm not I'm not a pre-construction condo lover for a lot of reasons. I think if you want to buy pre-construction as an investment, if you are getting in really, really, really early, you know, it's not that you're going to lose money on it. There's a lot. We could talk about pre-construction all day and why it's good for some and not good for others. I think as an investor, it's really, really important that you know what you're buying and the associated costs. You don't know what any of that is pre-construction. Like you could buy something and it doesn't close for 10 years and you don't know, okay, 5 years, you don't know what the rents are the maintenance fees are going to be, or what problems might be associated with that building and what lawsuits it may enter into. So there's a lot of things about pre-construction that I think are great, but from an investment standpoint, I don't love it.
Yeah, from an investment standpoint, where are you making your money? That's what you got to concentrate on.
Exactly.
Investing a little bit to make some in 5 or 10 years, or do you want to start making some money now?
Exactly.
If you want to start making some money now, why would you consider a pre-construction?
Right. And I think if you're buying pre-construction as an end user that you intend to live in over time, or maybe you're buying it for your children to live in, or you want to retire there at some point, I think that's a different story. But just buying it as an investment, I think there's way better options. So let's look a little bit about where the best areas, 10 of the best areas to buy in Canada, according to Money Sense magazine and a couple of other forecasters. These are the cities. So when you are thinking about buying an investment property, let's say we have eliminated the condo option for the moment, you are looking for a house. These are some areas that you might want to be considering. And I have a little bit of a chart below, which I think is probably a little bit more helpful. This gives you a rough idea of what some of these cities, what the average price is today, what the rent cost would be for a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom. So going back a little bit, when we talked about, having a duplex, for example, I would always look at buying a property that has more than one unit, because obviously you're getting double the income. And the difference between renting out a 2-bedroom, a whole house, or a 2-bedroom on one level is really it's not a huge difference. It might be only a couple $100. Whereas if you add an apartment in the basement, or it comes with an apartment in the basement, you all of a sudden could be getting another $1,500. So this just gives you a rough sketch. And obviously
people have the idea that they want to buy their investment property in the location where they live.
yes.
And you're an interesting case study there, because to my knowledge, I don't think you own anywhere you live.
No.
And
No.
you have this, people have this conception that they want to be close to their investment property. They want it to be in the city where they live. And that's just not the case. In fact, as you can see from this list, Toronto is far down on the list. And I think you, in fact, Janelle, have some properties that you've never even seen.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't
when you're
matter.
buying an investment property, what matters is the economics.
Yeah, you're really, you need to be looking at simply just what makes sense, what you can afford, first of all, and then where the returns are going to be. So this list focused on where cities in Ontario that they see a lot of growth happening, where they anticipate rent will continue to grow and stay strong. And as you can kind of see here, and this is something that, might be important for you to analyze, but, looking at, okay, well, I can afford 310,000 with my down payment. That makes sense, with my mortgage being, $250,000, and I get a duplex, maybe 2-bedroom upstairs, 2-bedroom downstairs. Okay, I can now visualize where I'm going to be making some money from that, as opposed to potentially buying a condo for, 600,000 or 700,000, and maybe you're only getting $2,000 or $2,500 only, but on top of that, you have the maintenance fees and all of that associated. Okay, so
yeah, I'm often struck by the fact that across the province we see, different. You see the average prices here, but I've always been kind of struck by the rents across those towns are not grossly different. So doesn't it intuitively make more sense to buy something at a much lower average price if the rents are not grossly lower and projected to grow and increase?
yeah, and you have to look at the margins. I mean, because people tell me all the time, I want to buy an investment property. I live in Toronto, but I can't afford it in Toronto. Well, don't buy in Toronto. It doesn't make sense for most of us to do that unless you have a lot of money to spend. And that's great, because, your returns will be good, but maybe it's better to buy, a place in Hamilton and one in Thunder Bay for the same price that you could buy one in Toronto. That's something that you really have to think about.
Right.
So how much should I spend? I mean, this is such an important question that people often ask, like, do I spend the max that I can, or like, what can I get? What makes sense? And I think a lot of this is going to come down to for most of you to really, some of these considerations that you have to think about. Okay, so, your down payment is a big one. So we know that most of us can't just walk in and get a second mortgage, right? Assuming you already have a property, you need to put down a certain amount of money. They are generally looking for at least 20%. So for 20%, that's going to make a difference back here, right? So 20%, for a Toronto property is a lot more money than you need to come up with for a property in Thunder Bay, for example. So,
May I interrupt? Maybe
yeah.
This isn't a good time before you move on. Considering location again. One of our participants is saying he would like to buy an investment with the option to move in the long term. And this is the question: is it common to find cash flow neutral properties in good residential areas in the cities, or are more multiplex properties located in busier areas?
No, you can find them anywhere, not necessarily busier areas at all. In fact, I would say it's pretty evenly split no matter where you go. There's always a lot of options. Yeah, either or. So yeah, okay. So the other thing I wanted to mention in terms of considerations is that, sometimes people want to buy two properties for the price of one as opposed to just buying one. And if that's something that you're able to do and your lender allows that, that might be something nice too. Maybe you want to buy one in Windsor and one in Thunder Bay so that you've got a bit of a diversification there. So, don't just think about doing the maximum you can afford for one property. Think about, well, maybe I could buy two or three instead of just buying one here in the city.
And that provides some stability. There's going to be times of vacancy. There's going to be fluctuations in different cities. So that kind of approach, rather than buying the one more expensive investment property, to me makes great sense.
Me too.
It's all along the lines of not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. Okay. So yeah, other things like where, how much are rents in those cities? What are the vacancy rates like? And that's something you have to do a little bit of research about, but there are some cities that maybe there's a lot higher turnover than there are for rentals in other cities. I have to say, probably in the market climate we're in now, every city seems to have, a great need for rental properties right now because people have nowhere to live. So probably not a huge issue at the moment, but again, something to think about. Obviously the cost as well. Property management fees, and we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. Property taxes and insurance. This is a really big one. I bought my first property in Ajax, and Ajax, unbeknownst to me, had at the time, because I wasn't really thinking about it, has the worst property taxes. So that really, cuts into my overall income at the end of the month, because I'm paying $200 more a month for property insurance there or property taxes there than other places. Same thing with insurance, right? Certain areas are more expensive than others, so it's worth thinking about.
So you got to look at the bigger picture. Yeah, you got to not just the asking price or sale price.
That's right. Yeah, there's all those
maintain and run the property.
Exactly. And I really want to stress this. I think it is my belief, and it's harder now than it used to be, but it is my belief that if you are not at least even or positive cash flow by the end of the month, something's wrong. Like, you should be really looking to focus on something that's going to be giving you a return. And that's where I see people go wrong most of the time. And it's largely because they're trying to buy condos. They cannot cash flow positive. And this should be giving you some extra money at the end of the month, if you can do it.
So do people fall into that trap because they don't realize or account for all the expenses?
I think so. I think there's
that they overestimate the rent.
I think both. I think, you touched on it earlier about having vacancy rates. I mean, if you have, one unit or one condo or a house with only one renter and the renter's out for a period of time, it's harder to, obviously you're not getting any income in at all. And maybe it's going to take you several months of no income, and you have to make sure that you can afford that. Whereas if you have a duplex, at least somebody's going to be there while you're looking for another tenant. It's almost always one in a duplex, one rent should pay for your mortgage. That's right. Just usually how it should work, and usually does work.
See, would anybody go into it expecting to be in the negative at the end of every month?
Yeah, I do hear that all the time, because I get questions like, but I live in this building and I want to buy another one in this building. And so, because I really like it here. And so I think I'd like to buy one. It's like, well, okay, great. But I have clients right now, I'll just give a quick story. They own a unit in a building in Etobicoke. They bought a larger unit that they moved into. and want to keep their other unit. And I said, sell it. Like, get for this price, we can go buy you a great place somewhere in Durham. You know, you can spend $700,000. You're going to be making a positive cash flow. It's going to be a way better investment for you. And they will do that. They will do that as soon as they reasonably can, because they're locked into a bit of a mortgage term situation at the moment. But it's
So I
exactly
think the lesson there, yeah, the lesson there is to be guided strictly by the economics. To say you want to buy in a building because you like it, very nice, but who cares?
Right. It doesn't
Liking
matter.
it is not a factor in your investment purchase decision.
Exactly.
That's where I think people fall into a trap.
I think so too. And I think maybe they just don't have as much knowledge about what the options are, which is kind of why we're here today. Because I think I would love to see everybody succeed in this area for sure. The other thing is, I think it's important to know it takes time to find the right property, and you have to run the numbers. You have to really make sure that you are looking at all the different scenarios and crunching it all together and figuring out what's going to work for you financially. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit, but this is important. So you are going to need, let's assume you already have a mortgage. Most of us are going to need at least 20% down on an investment property. This is money that you can't borrow from anyone, or you can't borrow it back from the bank. You need to have 20% cash. That's generally how it works. So as you're looking at, areas to buy or what you'd like to buy, you want to keep that in mind, because you have to make sure that you have that money, but you can't borrow your down payment. What you can do is, my last point on there, sometimes, is refinance or pull some equity from your existing home. And all of this depends on your financial situation. But if you have owned your home for a while and you have a pretty good, mortgage, in terms of you've been paying it down and there's maybe not a lot left on the mortgage, and your credit is good and all of that kind of stuff, then it might be an option for you to take that, $60,000 out and put that on your home in Thunder Bay, for example. So that's something you need to talk about with your bank. But for the most part, you need the cash, and you cannot borrow it. Vacancy rates are important. So when a lender analyzes what you can afford from a mortgage standpoint, they're going to look at, let's say it's a duplex, they're going to say, okay, well, we're going to assume that this place is vacant for X number of months of the year, and make sure that you are qualified based on that. So they will give you more money because it's an investment property, that's true, but they won't give you all of that in assuming that, okay, well, this person is going to be getting $4,000 a month, so in rent, so we're going to take it at that. They may work a formula to say, well, 4,000, but we include this type of vacancy rate, so we're going to call that 2,800, and look at that in terms of your overall ability to be able to afford that property. So the point there is really, you have to talk to the lender and make sure, everyone's circumstance is a little bit different. All of that other stuff is important. Your credit score, your income, your financial stability. I've got some people who are very cash rich, but income poor, and the banks don't like that, and they will not give you money for an investment property for that. So you need to, generally, there are certainly extenuating circumstances, but for most of us, you need to be making money and have a decent income in order for you to be able to borrow money on a second property. They treat it a little bit differently than a first property. Okay.
Janelle, what about people who don't currently own a property?
That's a different story. And then we're kind of looking at you being a first-time buyer anyway. So then we kind of get into, do you want to live in one unit and rent out another, or do you want to rent out both units? And
lenders look at that, look at your answers to those questions.
They absolutely do. And I think, that's probably a little different than what we're talking about today, but it's a great option. Leslie and I talk about this all the time on our podcast. Like, if you're someone who can't afford to buy, if you don't own property and you can't afford to buy something in the city, why not buy something way out of the city, rent it out, and, start making money from that, make a monthly income, make your annual returns, you know, and then you can sell it or pull some equity from that in 5 years and
Well,
then
you
buy.
continue to rent yourself. Like there's no
Or,
reason not to be an
yes,
investment purchaser and continue to rent.
that's right.
If you're
Yeah.
living somewhere that's really expensive.
Yeah. I think they're not mutually exclusive. And for some reason, people think they are.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, what is your role as an investor? So that's important, I think, for, everybody to know, because this is the part where I get into but I don't want to live there and all of that kind of stuff. So if you buy an investment property, you've got two options. You are either going to manage it yourself or you're going to hire a property management company to do it for you. There's rarely an in between. So
And
either
what
you
would
give,
that be?
well, believe me, I'm going through that right now with someone who kind of, they want their hand in, but they don't, you know, and it sort of
It's
doesn't
like
work.
being kind of pregnant.
It's being kind of pregnant.
Mhm.
So these are your options. Self-managing the property is obviously a lot cheaper, but it comes with a lot of headaches. And hiring a property management company is, in my opinion, the only way to survive this game, because they do everything for you. Now this opens up the possibility that you can buy property anywhere you want. It doesn't have to be in Ontario. It doesn't have to be anywhere, because someone is going to do everything for you. They're going to find your tenants. They're going to collect the rent. They're going to send you a check every month. They're going to tell you when there's problems and they're going to fix it. And all of that will go for about 8 to 10% of the gross rent, which in my opinion is really little. Like that is a great deal for you to be completely hands off and just collect the money every month. When you self-manage something, and I've made this mistake twice, you are getting the toilets and tenants call at 3 a.m, and there's this problem and that problem. And I don't like my neighbor and this person's too loud. And it's all this, crap that none of us want to deal with. Property management companies, number one, don't generally have those problems because they know how to shut that down, and tenants don't tend to do that as they do with people that are managing it themselves. And there's just that whole level of freedom. So, for most of us, when they're vacant, they fill the space. You don't even know what's happening. You don't approve the tenants. And if you want to, you can, but I don't get involved in any of that. They're the experts. I let them do what they want. I stay away. And, if there's a problem, they let me know, hey, your furnace broke. What do you want to do? You want to replace it? You want a repair person? They sort it out. You make those sort of ultimate decisions, but they do it all. And I think that's exactly what you want to be doing. And then, these tenant disputes with the landlord and tenant board, if they don't pay the rent, if anything like that is a problem, those guys take care of it. You don't have to worry about it. So,
Yeah, sounds like a small price to pay.
oh, it is. I would pay them more. I would pay them anything. It's just so I don't get those phone calls.
I mean, I have a few clients who do manage their properties themselves, and that's their choice, that's their preference. But I would say in each circumstance, it's not easy. It's never easy. They're choosing a difficult route. That's their choice, but it's constantly a headache and a worry.
Yeah, when the phone rings, you cringe and you've got, oh
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And I find that, if it's maybe a condo that you do have as an investment, or if you live nearby, then it's not so bad. It's not as big of a deal. But for those of us that have full-time jobs and are just trying to do this, to save for retirement, it's really difficult to have to deal with all of that kind of stuff. So you have to be a bit of a hands-off person and be aware that, someone is going to take care of it all for you, and you have to be okay with that. So is this the right solution for you? I think there are so many things to think about, but again, when we talk about these expected returns, the important points are houses are better than condos. If you want to make, monthly income, multi-units are better than single family, but each one is going to be a little bit different. Each neighborhood's a little bit different. And again, I can't stress enough, if you're not making a monthly income, then something is going wrong or breaking even. Okay, I'm not saying that you have to be making a ton of money, but breaking even for sure. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of my houses that I purchased and kind of where they're at today, because I think this is really good for everyone to see. So I bought my first little semi-detached duplex in Ajax, and I think it was 2013. This is about 10 years ago. At that time, I was getting $2,500 for the upper and $1,200 for the lower, getting a little bit more for it now, but if so my mortgage amount was only, I think, about 180 or 190,000. I was making $1,000 a month net after expenses on that. And that value of that property today is about 1 million. So it was worth more last year, but now it's come down to a little bit about 1 million. So when someone asked how I felt about the market kind of ebbing and flowing, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to sell it. So if it's 50,000 more or 100,000, it was probably 100,000 more last year than it is today. That's fine. It doesn't really matter.
You bought it for 260.
I bought it for 260. Who cares? And I'm not planning on doing anything with it anytime soon. In 2016, I bought one in Hamilton for 260. It got 2,300 for the upper and 1,300 for the lower, and the value today is about 800,000. Hamilton is a great market to buy investment properties, and there's still some really good deals. And by the way, it's the market right now that I think, other than Mississauga, like Hamilton is really down. It's starting to pick back up and it'll go fast, but that's where I would probably really be thinking about. And then I bought two in Windsor, one in 2018 and then one in 2020. Obviously lower rents here, but the purchase prices were lower. So 190,000 for the first one, which is worth about 500, maybe 550 today. So that's not bad in just about 5 years. And then even the other one I bought has gone up over 100,000 in the last year and a half, basically, or 2 years, I guess it is. And that was a very small basement apartment, but a large upper apartment. So I put 13,000. It's supposed to be 1,300 upper and about 950 for the lower. And it's, like I said, worth about 350 today.
So you're overdue for a fifth one.
Yeah, so that another important thing is that the lenders will not give most of us more than 5 mortgages. So once I pay, so yes, I should be ready.
I didn't know that. So there, I've learned today.
Yeah, for self-employed people, especially, I don't know for, so yeah, I'm planning probably to hopefully buy something.
So you have to pay something off.
Yeah, so I'm close to paying something off now. So I'm thinking maybe I'd be looking at maybe Niagara, maybe Thunder Bay, just something a little bit different. I would even consider buying something else in Windsor, just because I really like what the city's doing there. I think it's been really good. So as Leslie mentioned before, I bought these places in Windsor. I never even saw them. I still haven't seen them. I have a realtor there that I know, and I told her to pick me out a couple of good places in both these instances, and she did, and we bid on them, we got them, and I hired a property manager. They did the home inspection, and that's it. So
now someone's asking your, I think I'm interpreting this question correctly, but your opinion about whether if you're buying a place with a basement apartment, for example, whether you should buy one that has a legal basement apartment or does it not have to be? Yeah,
so great question. And I think the statistic is 90% of apartments are not legal. So should you? I mean, in an ideal world, yeah. But do most of us? Probably not. I mean, it would be nice if they were all legalized, but some of them are, let's put it this way. If it doesn't look like something that can be easily legalized, I probably would stay away from it. So if there's obviously not 2 means of egress from the unit, the ceilings are low, the windows are small, if it looks like a problem, I would stay away from it. But I think if it looks like something that you could maybe eventually convert over to a legal apartment, and then maybe you want to think about it. And there are people out there who will only buy legal apartments, and I appreciate that, or legal dwellings. But they're maybe not as common as ones that are not legal. There's a lot of laws around too, like there's a lot of units that would be considered not currently legal, but are grandfathered from when they were legal at some point. So sometimes we call those legal non-conforming. So they don't conform to the current bylaws today, but they're kind of okay. So that's just something you have to really, think about and be aware that there are potential problems if you buy something that's not legal, but maybe you're okay with that. I'm not really sure. That's probably not a
Yeah, I
special.
think each individual's comfort level
Yeah,
with, maybe think of what's the worst case scenario,
right.
and can I afford that worst case scenario? And then, if that's your comfort level, then that's your decision.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a housing crisis, clearly. Rental properties are needed. In some places I've seen some maybe kind of coming down hard on this, but for the most part, I don't know, Janelle, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But if you look at a property and think, worst case scenario, if I was made to make this, legally acceptable, could I do that? Could I afford it? And would I do that? Then by all means, there's your comfort level right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and just so you know, this is just something interesting to keep in mind when you're looking at listings of any kind, and this is how we tell, is they say, usually when it says there are 2 kitchens in a listing, that usually means it's legal. And when it says it's a 1+1 kitchen, it usually means that it's not a legal apartment. That could also mean it's not an apartment, but just has an extra kitchen. But usually if it says it has 2 kitchens, that means it's legal. Not always, but that's a rule of thumb to think about if it's something that's important to you and you're browsing through, you just want to think about it. Okay, and then a couple things I wanted to mention because I thought this is really important are my tricks. That some of these are mistakes. Raise the rent every single year. So when you self-manage something, you have to make sure that you are raising the rent. Normally your property manager will do it for you automatically. And every year the Ontario puts out the guidelines of what you can raise the rent by. I think this year was 2.3%. So every year is different. You cannot raise the rent arbitrarily. It has to be at the 1 year mark of their lease, like after their lease is up, and it has to be based on the guidelines. You can't just ask for more because it's undervalued. But if you keep on top of it all the time, you're not going to have a problem. The problem is if you don't raise the rent every year. I made this mistake with my first property that we got so far behind. And now I'm raising it every year, but for the first 5 years, I didn't do it enough when rents were going up. And now the person that's there is paying way less rent than they should and whatever, but I would have a hard time selling it. That's the issue, is that I would have to make sure that they leave before I sold it because no new landlord would take them on as a tenant paying that really low rent. And once you have a tenant in there, it's really hard to get rid of them. So that's not something we'll talk about today necessarily because that's a very long-winded conversation. But the second thing is if you have a problem tenant or your tenant does not pay or your tenant is late, you need to get on that right away and file with the landlord and tenant board. So again, don't waste time having conversations with them about what happened. Are you planning to pay? Okay, I'll give you an extra week. All of these things should never happen. It has to be, they don't pay their rent on the 1st. You are at the landlord and tenant board with your notice to them by the end of day. That's it. The next day. The further, the longer you waste time going to the LTB with problems, the longer it's going to be to get the tenant out. And getting good tenants is pretty easy if you're doing it right, but every once in a while, myself included, you get a bad tenant and you gotta act fast. Make sure you understand the landlord and tenant board rights for both parties, because I have a young woman who bought an investment condo a couple of years ago, and she just emailed me the other day to say, I think I'm going to raise my tenant's rent by 5%. And so we can't do that. Like, no idea what the rules are. So good idea that everybody understands that before you move into this process, because tenants have a lot more rights than landlords. And that's just how it is. You should keep it for the long haul, as I mentioned, because then these, nickels and dimes aren't going to mean anything for you. I think if you're looking for something to flip, probably buying a duplex or something is not the right property for you. This is really something you should be looking at as a long-term investment strategy to really maximize your money. Because, as my next point is, some years are better than others. I mean, I had a year last year where I think I replaced 3 roofs. I had 1 flooded basement. I had to do, I think, 3 or 4 laundry machines. Like, everything went wrong. I made no money last year, but I've been making money for 10 years in a row. So you have to know that these things go up and down, and just keep, that in mind as you're going through this process. You may have, 1 bad year, but the next 5 or 6 are going to be great. So that's all part of home ownership. That's just how it goes. You should always have a reserve fund handy, because if you are just scraping by, if you own an investment property, it's going to be tough for you if you do need to replace that roof, or the tenant decides to destroy your home and you have to, redo everything, which, by the way, does not happen very often, but we've all heard the horror stories. The next one, guys, is like, you're not going to live there. So I made this mistake when I was shopping for something. I was like, ugh, this is so gross. I would never live here. It's like, well, I'm not going to live here. I'm just going to own it. So you are not buying something that you're going to live in. So it doesn't matter where it is or what it looks like or any of that. All that matters is, is it rentable? Are people going to like it? Is that a neighborhood that people want to live in? How much money are you going to get? That's the main focus. So don't worry so much about whether you like it or not, or how you feel about it personally. This is not an emotional investment. This is strictly based on money. And again, just don't worry about the small costs, as we've said, because everything will work out in the wash. In fact, things will be great. But you can't get hung up on the little things. Even the purchase price, I think sometimes, like, if you're a little bit worried now about this one doesn't cash flow, or I'm just right on the neutral line. Well, you're probably going to pay that off a little bit here and there over the next couple of years. Your tenant, your rents are going to go up. And so the next thing you know, in a year or two, you are cash flow positive. So, you can't worry too much about just the small little bits of money. All right. And that's, I think, basically what we had. Do we have any other questions there, Leslie, that anyone wanted to ask?
I'm going to read, there was one more question that I haven't posed of you, and see what you say to this. So someone is, because I'm not sure I understand the question, but you will, I know that. Let's say you have 2 rentals on a single residential unit. What's that experience like? Especially if it's a semi or a single with a basement apartment.
So I think the question is, if there are like a duplex, like 2 units in the one dwelling, I think that's what.
Not sure. So I'll read. Duplex having 2 different rentals, not a problem. But let's say you have 2 rentals in a single residential unit. What's that like?
So I'm not entirely sure what that means. Like, 2 people sharing the unit?
So is it asking asking perhaps what the difference is between a duplex and maybe something, for example, like a bungalow with a main floor and a basement?
Yeah, I guess let's
There are
assume
different 2 experiences.
Yeah, let's assume that's the question. And I'm calling anything a duplex that has 2 units, whether they are legal or illegal, but there are 2 separate units in the home. So I think that hopefully, I don't know, like I said, the person maybe could clarify, but I think that's it would be the same experience if we're talking duplex to duplex.
Okay, so someone else is asking about your knowledge or feedback about personal corporations buying homes. For example, are there any struggles getting a mortgage?
I don't think it makes a difference. They qualify you as a corporation as they do as an individual. So a lot of that just depends on, all your personal circumstances, but I don't think you'll find as an investor it makes a difference. I mean, people do have corporations. I've never done it. It's just not something I've felt I've needed to do. There are tax implications for that, which can potentially benefit you, but that's something you really need to talk to your accountant about, because with those tax benefits come more restrictions on how you manage the property or how much income you're taking. So not my area of expertise, but I know when I've explored it, I've decided that it's easier for me to keep it in my own name. But I don't think from a mortgage standpoint it necessarily makes a difference.
Okay, that's good. I'm just reading this word for word. Do you have any examples from the last 6 months of great investments you've seen on the market? What was the general price point, location, property type? And are you still seeing strong options in Durham?
Yeah, strong options in Durham, but prices are up there for sure. You would never find something now in like a semi-detached duplex, under probably 850. So although the rents are pretty high now, but you'd be positive there, but it would be probably not a huge return. Probably the
So
best deals
you'd be looking at the West End or Hamilton right now.
I would be looking at Hamilton right now or Niagara. Those seem to be now there are areas of Niagara that are pretty hot, but I think Niagara as a rule is pretty good. And Hamilton, I have a client that picked one up in Hamilton recently, and he got a great deal, like 650, I think he paid. And it's a detached house in a good neighborhood with two amazing units that I'm not sure what ultimately the rent will be, but it'll be well over for 4,200 a month for both units. So I would say Hamilton is where I've seen some good deals, but I'm pretty sure the prices are going to go way up there anytime. Oshawa used to be a really good market, but it's become really, really tight in terms of inventory because a lot of investors bought there and now the prices have really skyrocketed. Barrie's not bad. I haven't looked at it too carefully, but it's not a bad option. And there's some, like I say, Thunder Bay, like some really good deals out there. And the rental market is hot in Thunder Bay. So because people can't afford to buy there. So that's a market I'd be looking at for sure.
I just wanted to get back to you with, we did interpret the question correctly earlier. The individual was asking for if there were any differences between what was generally called a duplex versus something, for example, like a bungalow with a finished basement. So
yeah, I mean, I'm not legal. They're not necessarily legal duplexes, but a duplex obviously meaning that it's a good point, because some people think like a semi-detached, like two units attached, they call those duplexes in some areas. Like I think in Quebec, that's not called a semi-detached, it's called a duplex. So what we call duplexes are two units in one home.
Yeah.
And so triplex being obviously three.
Yeah. Someone's asking what you think about Peterborough.
Hey, Peterborough's not bad. I would definitely be considering Peterborough.
I think any town with a university.
Anytown University is good. That's a whole other kettle of fish, though, like buying something in a university town.
But it seems to speak to the viability of the town.
It does, yeah. I think, which is why Oshawa picked up so much. Guelph is another area, right, which is really good, but higher price. I think Peterborough is great, but maybe a little higher price. Kingston is also really good, but to get something reasonable in Kingston, you kind of have to buy it in the not so great area. But I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I mean, my place in Hamilton is like literally in the worst area of town. It's terrible. I mean, it's scary even to go there, but who cares, right? I mean, it's making money. They're taking care of it. The property manager deals with the issues, and I've made a ton of money on it. And I mean, you wouldn't believe that place is worth that much now, but when I first bought there, it was rougher than rough.
Do you have greater tenant problems in rougher areas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where the property managers come in, and good property managers, like the people in Hamilton, weed through when I have vacancies, which I actually haven't even had vacancies there for years now, but they would weed through and eliminate all the people that they already know, because those people have all been through the system. They're
Yeah.
like, nope, 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 nope. Okay. And then the one person I have in Hamilton now, the property manager said, oh, we've placed this guy before. He's a great tenant. So we highly
So
recommend.
that's another huge advantage of using a property
Huge.
manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a question. Someone's asking about advice for a potential buyer who thinks that perhaps bank rates could increase more this year. If they delay, do they risk paying more? Should you buy now? Like, what is your advice given someone who has concerns about what's going to happen?
It's always a tough question. I think that we don't have a crystal ball. I don't anticipate interest rates going way down or anything. So I think that, putting things in perspective, they're still pretty low. So I mean, it wouldn't scare me, because I think there's a misconception that they're all of a sudden going to drop down to 2% again, but I don't see that coming anytime soon. At the same time, I don't think they're necessarily going to go up much further either. So I don't really know. I'm not sure. It's like you and I always say, Leslie, you can't time the market. You can't time that either. I mean, it's a bit of if you're looking at something for the long haul, again, a point or two in an interest rate, that's going to happen. You have to be prepared for that. Maybe you buy now and you're paying, 5%, but 5 years from now you're paying 2, but maybe 5 years from now you're paying 10. That's all part of ownership of a home. Like, we just don't know. So I'm not sure I would let that influence my decision at all.
We get this question by buyers of all types, buying investment property or not, and people just looking for residential property. And I just think we live in a part of the world where, other than the odd blip, home prices escalate. So yes, there's clearly a risk buying later that prices will be higher. Will those increases outpace rate increases? That's what you have to consider. But you put it off, you're almost without question paying for more for that property.
Yeah, that I think we can guarantee.
Yeah, it's guaranteed. Here's a kind of an amusing question, is like, how do you prepare for the time period between when you buy and when you start to collect rent?
For me, only one time. It was the one Windsor property I bought. Has it been a long time? And I think it was kind of 6 months of vacancy with one unit, but the other one was filled right away. So when we talk about having a bit of a reserve, to cover all of those expenses and costs, that's one of those things you want to be aware of, because if you're so strapped that and a tenant leaves and you don't have it filled for another 3 months, and that's going to break you, not the right time for you. You have to be able to go, probably, make sure you can, I'd say, last 6 months, just in case. Now, I've never had that happen. Most of mine are filled immediately, but if you can't sustain, a good 5 or 6 months, then I would say don't do it, because that probably means you can't afford to fix the furnace or the roof or whatever. And that's, all part of it, right?
So that's part of your qualification, your consideration about what you can afford and where you can afford.
Yeah.
Is having that reserve.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this already, and so I know your answer to this, but someone's asking about, negative talk of certain areas. Is it still wise to invest there? I think you dealt with that with your handling of Hamilton, but in particular, this individual is asking about, South Oshawa. for example. But in general, I guess the question is,
Yeah.
do you still wise to buy an investment property in an area that's maybe a
Yeah.
bit, I don't know, sketchy?
Let's talk about South Oshawa. That's a great example. South Oshawa, you wouldn't be caught dead in 10 years ago, and it went crazy. And now the prices in South Oshawa for a bungalow are just as much as they are in some other good areas of Oshawa. So that is a good example of buying in a neighborhood that is a little bit less desirable, because everything gentrifies eventually. And so again, who cares? As long as the rent is justifying, that purchase price, that probably means that you're getting a little bit less, you're paying a little bit less anyway for that property. And then that, potentially could work to your advantage in a huge way when that particular neighborhood does gentrify and becomes a little bit more desirable. And then the next thing you know, your rent's going up and everything else. So I wouldn't shy away from any of that. I again, like, really looking at the numbers is the key component here, and making sure that that all works and not worrying too much about anything else. Because again, you're not going to live there.
I agree. I think we have one final question here, and I don't know, I think we're approaching 8 o'clock, Janelle. And I think that we talked about this earlier, but just to reinforce, here's the question. If you can afford it, is it wise to buy in a neighborhood where the appreciation is going to be greater, or invest in two properties in maybe not so great a neighborhood?
I like this question because I would like to know where appreciation in a better neighborhood is greater. Because if you look at the research, you're going to find most of the time it's not any better in an area that we think is nicer or a better neighborhood than a neighborhood like South Oshawa, which has been seeing 45% returns for the last 3 years in a row. So I think that it's a bit of a misnomer to assume that appreciation is better in Toronto than it is in Windsor, because it's not. So there are obviously areas that appreciate more than others, but it's almost, the GTA and extended has almost been identical in the last 5 years in terms of its appreciation. We're all seeing, 10%, 20% returns at the same time. So there are very few cities I can think of right now that I would be worried about their appreciation in the upcoming years.
And when you consider where to invest, what percent kind of focus do you put on the appreciation question, in terms of value of the house versus your, positivity, cash flow positivity, and your, whole rental experience, quality of candidates, that type of thing?
I think it's just a bit of a mix, and doing a lot of reading about where are the best areas, and sort of kind of combining it all together, because yeah, like I'm always looking for the next best sort of neighborhood or the next best area to buy in. And I'm looking at these places where they're low to start, but I'm making these huge returns, over the next few years, because their neighborhood or their cities that are, have nowhere to go but up type idea. Windsor, again, great example of that. So, yeah, so I think, I'm not sure I could say for sure, but it's just, I think everything thrown into the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess that's it. I think that was everything for today. I hope that has been really helpful for everyone. We do have the slides, so I can send those out if you would like them. Just let us know. And the recording as well, I will send to you. And just reach out to us with any questions, because we can always hopefully, answer those more directly and specific to your needs, instead of just sort of a general type thing. And I guess that's it. All right.
Well
Thanks.
done.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
Here, Janelle, can I just look at these last questions?
Yes.
Or are we running out of time? We just had a couple of we just had a couple of thank yous.
Oh,
So that's very nice of you to say.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.